Like, why didn't anybody check on her? I think I mentioned it was like, she entered at 1,600 hours and she wasn't checked on until the following day.
Family members of a woman who died at this Winnipeg shelter and went unchecked for several hours want to see a provincial inquest held to examine her death. They say they need answers as to why policy and protocol at the shelter wasn't followed and why the beloved mother and sister was neglected in her final hours.
Like with any other publicly funded organization, there's accountability that has to happen.
Cheryl Whitford was at the Nitamayawak shelter when she passed in October of 2022, her body undiscovered for several hours. City News has learned body and breathing checks, supposed to be done every 15 to 30 minutes by staff, were not performed. But a source with knowledge of the death tells City News they feel if the checks had been done, Cheryl may still be alive today. Officials at the shelter confirmed Whitford went unchecked for hours, but who failed to check on Whitford specifically is still a matter of debate, whether it was the responsibility of the Sabe Peace Walkers or the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs personnel. Cheryl's sister says the loss devastated her family and something must be done, as the people who rely on these shelters are already vulnerable.
We do expect certain answers when things like this do happen, and with the shelters that are in place and with the jobs that they're doing, there is a certain level of trust there, I guess, that, if I find myself in that situation where I were to need shelter, that it's going to be a safe place. I mean, that is the meaning of shelter, right? Is that we are protected.
Being remembered as a kind, caring person who loved her family dearly and would advocate for herself and others, Tana says her sister's life took a turn after suffering a broken back that required pain medication. Feeling she was overprescribed and never properly cared for by medical professionals, Tana says Whitford would become more vulnerable as the injury and pain persisted. While she knows the shelter does good work and many staff members care, she says the fact that Whitford was not properly looked after in her time of need has to be examined to prevent future tragedies, saying her sister said there were people at the shelter who were trying to help her.
But that said, there's many different workers, and I understand there are policies maybe that weren't followed, and that needs to be looked at, because we need to have that consistency across the board.
A request for comment from the shelter on calls for the inquest was not answered by broadcast deadline. Shelter chairperson Victoria Fisher said in a previous statement, Whitford's death and other incidents are being examined. Quote, "We take all concerns seriously, and any findings from the review of these incidents will be acted on appropriately and shared with necessary funders and stakeholders where appropriate. For the respect of our relatives and the investigation process, we cannot speak specifically to any incident being reviewed at this time," end quote. A request for comment from Bernadette Smith, the Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness, was not accommodated by broadcast deadline. In Winnipeg, Modjeski, City News.